Wildfire by Rose Mackey, Book 3 in the Under Violet Sun series. Chapter 5. Dinner and a Show. She emerged 25 minutes later, and Vordan was nowhere in sight. She strode through the living room and considered her guns for a moment. It wasn't done to wear guns, particle weapons, or lasers at dinner, but she really didn't want to go unarmed. She heard Vordan return and turned to ask him about his weapons when she caught sight of his face. He was blanched with shock, staring at her open-mouthed. Her heart fell. "What's wrong with it? Don't you like it?" She looked at herself in the tall mirror next to the door. "I thought it looked nice." She had combined several of the outfits provided by her sister into a single look. The bottom was loose, shimmering dark green silk pants, with large slits up to the hips on each side, revealing morphic reptile-designed jewellery which twined up her thighs, constantly moving and shifting. Her father had bought her that jewellery when she turned 18, as a reminder of her Tritoran heritage. On the top she had taken a black corset from another outfit, shot through with silver and jet thread. She layered it with a short, shimmering black and silver pauldron and collar piece, which had a high, stiffened collar made of whirled silver designed to look like metal lace. It looked regal and had the added benefit of protecting her neck from attacks. Her hair she had twined up into a high crown, jet beads woven through her hair. They caught the light when she moved. In her hair she had hidden a couple more morphic jewellery pieces that slowly shifted, looking like tiny lizards peeking out from her curls. To most mammalian species, it would be highly disquieting, but to Tritau it was high fashion. Her booted heels were black, but high enough to qualify as dress shoes without being uncomfortable. The outfit presented as sexy, confident, mature, and regal. She had wanted to look like the pirate queen Vordan kept calling her, and she felt that she'd nailed it. Vordan clapped his mouth shut with a click, his brow furrowed. He prowled towards her, moving to stand behind her as she looked at herself in the mirror. He loomed a hair's breadth away from her, his clawed hands reaching for the silk pants on her hips when he paused. "May I?" She met his eyes in the mirror and gulped at what she saw there. The intensity seared her to her bones. She nodded once, slowly. The tension stretched between them. He reached out, the calluses on his hands snagging slightly on the silk as he stroked the fine material. She shifted imperceptibly, and the pants split up to her hips, only the barest scrap of material keeping her covered. He groaned and laid his fingertips on the coolness of her exposed skin. "My lady, I just know I'm going to have to kill some idiot for trying to touch you tonight." She met his eyes again. "Try not to. If they aren't family, they'll be clan, and it'll be problematic. We'd have to pay the death price for it." He smiled darkly. "It'll be worth it." "So, you like it?" He froze for a second, slowly releasing his hands from her hips. "I love it. Every inch the pirate queen. Just remember that you walked away from them. They are peasants." "Peasants whose help we need," she reminded him. "Dangerous peasants." "Okay, I'll admit, as an analogy, it needs work." She laughed, the searing intimacy of the moment broken, despite that she could still feel the warmth from his palm on the skin of her hip. She turned back to her guns and sighed. "I don't enjoy going in unarmed. All I have are my hairpins. I can't take any of the other weapons I brought." "What's allowed?" "Anything that's not a laser, particle, or projectile firearm." "Wait." He went to his bag and started rummaging, emerging with 2 items. "Try this." One was a woven back leather holster with a tiny bejeweled dagger in it. The other appeared to be some sort of wire. She took the leather holster. "This is lovely work. Where did you get it? Who is it for?" He flushed bright red and shuffled slightly. "I made it." Her eyes shot to his, wide in surprise. "It's lovely. You are a gifted artist." He beamed. "I've always enjoyed weaving and crafting. I enjoy working in leather as a medium. The dagger was for my sister." "I didn't know you had a sister." He smiled crookedly. "Why would you? I actually have 2. My mother was blessed by the goddess. This was for Fardi, the youngest. If we got a moment, I was going to send it to her. She has just passed her maman ceremony. She wouldn't mind if you borrow it for tonight. She'd want to help a sister." Lenora accepted it gratefully, touched. She held out her arm for him to attach the holster to her bicep. "What is this?" He grinned broadly when he looked at the bundle of wire. "Ah, I do like this. I got it on Intgal 2 the last time I was there, from a most unusual alien. Watch." He unrolled the wire and flicked his wrist. He pronounced an alien word she had never heard before. The wire flattened and clicked, and he held a long ribbon of curling metal that buzzed ever so slightly. He looked around and pointed at a small coffee table. "Is that valuable?" "No." He nodded and swiped the wire at the table. Where it hit, the table dissolved. The molecules simply broke apart. "It's undetectable until activated and is not particle, laser or projectile. It is inert until activated." She grinned. "I love it. Show me." They spent a few minutes practicing before he declared she was competent in the weapon, and he showed her how to return it to its inert state. "How should I carry it?" He motioned for her to raise her arms, and he wrapped the wire around her waist. In its inert state, it looked like an unusual belt. "This doesn't feel safe." "It's perfectly fine. It's designed for covert use." "You won't be saying that when I cut myself in half." "Have some faith, lady. And remember, you must call me Elle. They'd expect it." "Don't worry, Elle. We've got this." He gave her a wink. "Oh, goddess, we're doomed." He turned to his own pack and pulled out a long black coat, which he shook a few times. He pulled it on over his own plain black pants and shirt and turned to her. "What do you think?" He was stellar. His iron-grey metallic hair shone against the black on black. She fanned herself theatrically. "Who was it you said needed defending tonight? My clanmates will be all over you." He chuckled, and they wandered companionably into the night. The air had cooled, and the garden was full of shadows and secret places. She felt Vordan tense in awareness before he relaxed when Ari stepped out of the gloom. "Taken to hiding in corners, Ari?" asked Lenora. "Just testing your reflexes, sister." Ari's face was full of mischief before she smiled sadly. "You'll need it tonight." Lenora studied her sister as they fell into step. "That bad, huh?" Ari nodded, remaining silent. Lenora couldn't resist reassuring her. "Don't worry, it'll be fine." Ari glanced at her in disbelief, and Lenora nodded at Vordan. "He's here to protect us." Ari looked at her and cracked up laughing. "You've never needed anyone to protect you in your life, Ella. I can't imagine you starting now." "I think I'm offended," Vordan quipped, and Ari eyed him appreciatively. "He has a sense of humour, at least." Lenora snorted to hide her laughter. "At least?" Vordan was mock outraged. "Have you seen my biceps? I'm a pilot. On most planets, I'm considered a pretty good catch." Yes, of course you are, dear." Ari patted him on the arm condescendingly and danced out of the way of his clawed swipe and dramatic snarl of rage with tinkling laughter. "Bit touchy though, sis." "You're enough to drive anyone to violence," she retorted. They reached the hall just in time for pre-dinner drinks. Her father had not yet arrived, so the start of the evening was spent waiting for the other shoe to drop. They were assembled in a large dining hall with 50 of the senior members of Clan Uno, most family. Some seemed genuinely happy to see her, with many stopping by to welcome her back. In others she sensed dark, old resentments and jealousy. Yet more were suspicious, and those she watched most closely when they came under the guise of friendship, their calculating inquiries brittle and bright against her empathic senses as they probed for information. The swirling, churning emotions gave her a headache. Vordan handled it with grace, much better than she did. He smiled politely, flirted just enough to be charming, and loomed convincingly when the time called for it. She had to admit they made a good team. Even in all the mass of emotions, no one suspected that their relationship was fake. He was solicitous, his gaze following her when she spoke, laughed and moved. Wherever she went, he was there, a solid, warm presence. She had to admit she could get used to the feeling of having him on her team. It was a dangerous comfort. Once this mission was over, they would go their separate ways again. She could not allow herself to rely on his or anyone else's strength. They were just starting to eat when her father arrived. He strode into the hall without fanfare, his movement gliding and dangerous despite his advancing years. "Daughter mine, you have returned to the clan and you bring a guest." Lenora controlled her instinctive panic and anger and stood to greet him. "Yes, father. This is Vordan. We come with a business proposal." Her father nodded absently, his bright green eyes examining Vordan like a bug under a microscope. Oh no, this wasn't good. She'd seen that look before. She stepped in front of Vordan, forcing her father to look at her. "We would like to discuss the proposal," protecting him with her body. Her father didn't miss a beat, hissing at her, a rattle deep in his throat. "You know better than that, Lenoriel. Family always comes before business. You disappear, you don't write, you don't call. Then you come back with an unknown male. He finally met her gaze and she swallowed. He was furious. You, my eldest female, who said that she would never mate. His eyes fixed on Vordan over her shoulder, and she felt him come up to stand behind her. We must get to know your mate. You know we don't do business with people we don't know. You know me, she argued. Her father's gaze was fixed. Do we? I wonder. He held her gaze for a moment longer, his slitted eyes unblinking. Fortunately, this is not the Unor clan's first time with this quandary. We have established traditions for this. She blanched, fear making her light-headed. Father, please, we don't have time for this. He cut her off. Then we don't have time to hear your proposal. But, she responded weakly. He bared his teeth at her. You are in my house again, daughter. You will comply or leave. There is no third option. Lenora looked at Vordan, the question clear in her eyes. He straightened and stepped forward. I would be honoured to take part in your traditions, sir, but my lady is right. We are on a timeline. Is there a faster option? Her father weighed his sincerity and grunted, grudgingly impressed by his forthright and respectful manner. Very well, some things can't wait. We will do Suthaka tonight. If you pass, we will hear your proposal after. Vordan bowed, clamping his right arm over his chest. Thank you, sir. Her father grunted and turned back to the audience. Their watchers had given up all pretense at decorum and were straining to listen. He roared at them. There will be a Suthaka tonight. Our El would like her mate to be accepted into the clan. We welcome the mate of our daughter and will do him the honour of competing with our best. His eyes roved over the assembled clan members, assessing them. Huge, scarred, a variety of species. His gaze settled on a hulking form. Gruag shall represent Clan Unor. The assembled clan members roared their approval. The creature was huge, mottled, dark green and purple, with large tusks jutting forward from its jaw. Dutak spun back to Lenora and Vordan, his eyes glinting in excitement. He examined Vordan closely. The choice of weapons is mine. He paused for dramatic effect. I choose bladed melee weapons. Vordan nodded once and bowed again. He looked at Gruag, who glared at him from across the hall and smiled in a wide, arrogant grin. He leaned against the table, all relaxed arrogance. I accept. He winked at Gruag, who glowered at him harder. Her father chuckled, appreciative of the sass. 1/2 hour to prepare. Vordan turned to her and held out a hand, and she was conscious of all eyes on her. My lady, would you dine with me? It appears we have 1/2 hour before our evening engagement. Time for a quick light meal, I think. She bared her teeth at him in an approximation of a smile. If he survived tonight, she would murder him herself. Of course, beloved. Didn't he know not to goad her father? Gruag was a straight-up murderer. She allowed him to lead her back to her seat and fill her platter, aware of the noises in the hall slowly returning to normal. Her sister slid into the seat next to her, and under the guise of filling her cup, whispered, I have to admit your male has some sass. He's crazy, but he's got style. She nodded, afraid to respond that she might not be able to hide her anger and churning fear for him. Vordan slipped in beside her, placing their shared platter down. He draped an arm over the back of her chair and leaned in. Tell me of this Gruag. What species is he? How does he fight? Lenora unclenched her jaw. He isn't a species. We aren't sure what he is. He might be an engineered being. He is a killing machine, perfectly adapted for it. He is physically strong, has incredible stamina. His skin is impervious to most weapons. Father screwed you with melee weapons. A blade will never get through his skin. You'd need a particle cannon to make a scratch. He held up a piece of bread in offering to her. What weapons does he have? Claws? Fangs? Is he trained in blades? She nodded in thanks, and he applied a spread to her bread as she responded before passing it over to her. He's a meat grinder. He prefers axes or hammers. One hit is usually enough from him. She accepted the bread and deliberately took a bite, controlling her churning stomach. Is he a strategist? Vordan picked up a piece of fruit and nibbled on it, giving every appearance of relaxation. No, like I said, he's a grinder. He has one strategy, to beat into a pulp. She finished the bread and picked up a spoon, loading it with a spiced fish dish. She held it up to Vordan's lips to try. What are the rules of this Suthaka? He accepted a taste of the offered fish, screwing up his face at the bitter flavours. Lenora smiled and ate the rest. It is a timed contest. It is not usually to the death. The fighters compete for 20 minutes until one of them cannot continue, usually until one or the other is unconscious. A fighter may bow out early and accept defeat, but they will never be accepted into the clan and will never be allowed to retry. If the 20 minutes finish and both participants are still fighting, then the challenger is accepted. The only other rule is against bringing other weapons into the fight. Can I use my claws? Yes, it is part of you, as are his strength and size. Suthaka stood. It is time for Suthaka. Vordan hurriedly stood. Is there anything else I should know? You can only wear light pants and a shirt. No armor of any kind. He nodded. Lenora towed him through the room to a door on the far side. It was open to reveal a round pit, several lengths across, lowered the height of a person into the ground. All around the pit was a gantry where people could watch the combat. There was no cover, no opportunity to hide or escape. He turned to her. Your people do this so often you have a purpose-built room for it. She shrugged helplessly. Intergalactic crime clan, remember, blood sports is a casual rest day activity. He divested himself of his jacket, leaving just his loose black pants and shirt. After consideration, he dropped the shirt as well. Lenora sucked in a breath at the sight of him, chiseled muscles in pale skin. Showing off much? The shirt is too loose. Don't want to give him a grappling hold. Lenora walked him up to an opening in the gantry. Gruag was at an opening on the opposite side, her father standing next to him. Melee weapons are chosen for this Suthaka. Pick your weapon from the selection, challenger. The crowd split to reveal a wall of weapons. Vordan examined them carefully, finally selecting a type of spear with a long curving blade on one end and a short sword blade on the other. It had detailed filigree up and down the shaft in a distinctive gold metal pattern. Pick your weapon from the selection, defender. Gruag selected a large double-handed axe, a hammer. Enter the pit. Suthaka's voice boomed through the chamber. Both warriors jumped down the small drop onto the sand. Vordan took a couple of experimental swings with his spear, testing its weight and balance. Set timer 20 minutes or until a challenger cannot continue. Challenger may quit at any time. 2 loud klaxons sounded, followed by a third longer, and a large timer was projected on the walls around the pit. It started counting down. Vordan remained still, waiting. Gruag stood, poised, waiting for him to attack, his axe hammer held upright. When no attack was forthcoming, he roared at Vordan. Are you afraid, little cat, afraid to attack? Vordan smiled arrogantly. It's called strategy. You might try it sometime, but then perhaps not. It may be beyond you. I'm surprised you can actually speak at all. Gruag roared and swung at him. Vordan elegantly ducked under and swung his spear around in a whirling move that delivered double slices against Gruag's hands, where his fingers gripped the axe shaft. They exchanged places, pacing around the ring, each getting the measure of the other's speed. Vordan examined the other's hands where he had struck. As Lenora had indicated, there wasn't even a scratch. The skin was impenetrable to bladed weapons. Gruag swung again, this time much faster. Vordan ducked the first swing but was caught in an unexpected backswing which smashed into his ribs and threw him across the pit to smash into the opposite wall. He climbed to his feet gingerly. It had been a glancing blow across the ribs from the hammer edge, leaving a long trailing cut that bled red blood. He probed it. At least 2 broken ribs. Judging his effectiveness compromised, but not critically so, he returned his attention to the warrior. Clearly, Gruag had been hiding his strength and speed. Grudgingly, Vordan reassessed his opponent. The crowd cheered, some jeering at Lenora. He saw her out of the corner of her eye, unbothered by the display. She could have been waiting for an appointment. She gave every impression that she was supremely confident, that this was merely an inconvenient delay in their dinner plans. Vordan considered the male. The skin could not be pierced, but perhaps there were softer parts. He raised his spear, feeling along the filigree for the telltale thin line. Locating it, he pressed and twisted just so, and the spear split into 2, leaving him with a short-bladed sword and long-bladed scythe. The crowd oohed at the move. He had been delighted when he had spotted the distinctive Galatian pike in the weapons mix. It was a sparring favourite. Considering his options, he feinted towards Gruag, who raised his axe to defend on the right. Instead, Vordan spun left, running along the side of the pit and up the wall to land behind the hulking male. He swiped at the male's knees from behind with the scythe. He couldn't cut the skin, but a hit to the back of the knee would still off balance an opponent armored skin still responded to physics. Gruag stumbled, going down onto one knee. Vordan stepped forward on the lower side, grabbed the male's head, pulled it back, and shoved the short-bladed sword into his left eye. As he did, he hit some sort of bone plate. He couldn't thrust it in fully to complete the kill, but he had accomplished one goal. The creature was now blind in one eye. He pulled the sword back and danced away, as Gruag screamed in pain and dropped his axe to cover his wounded eye. Vordan moved to the left, staying in his blind spot as Gruag lumbered right, trying to keep him in sight. The crowd was totally silent, stunned at the unexpected turn of events. Gruag groped for his axe again and swung, but his depth perception and aim were off. Vordan ducked under the axe and lightly danced out of the way. Gruag bellowed at him, rage contorting his remaining features. The time on the clock had not yet ticked over 1 minute. Vordan feinted again, jabbing at Gruag with his scythe and short blade, forcing the male to spin around to see him, to slash out wildly. Vordan grinned fiercely, waiting for his opportunity. When he saw it, he took it. Gruag swung wide right and he simply stepped into the larger male's open arms and sliced at his right eye. He didn't stab this time, just sliced across, but it was enough. Gruag dropped his axe and shrieked in agony. By luck, he caught Vordan across the face in his panicked motions, and Vordan was thrown across the pit to lie stunned against the wall. He lay there for a few seconds, winded, listening to the creature shriek in pain. The faces of the Unor showed their stark disbelief. They were absolutely silent. The timer clicked over 2 minutes. Vordan stood slowly. "Dutak Unor, your champion is down, gravely wounded. If you end this now, you can still save his life and his sight. I can sit in this pit for another 18 minutes if required to fulfill your traditions, while you all watch your companion die for the sake of your own pride. Is your pride worth his life?" Dutak remained silent, his face furious. "Is this what the clan is worth to you? I would never leave my clan brother that had fought for our honor, brought so low for the sake of tradition and pride." Vordan sat cross-legged on the ground, stained with Gruag's green blood, and waited. The room was silent, everyone looking at Dutak, looking into the pit. Finally, Dutak ground out, "It is done. Suthaka is satisfied. The mate of our daughter is worthy. Medics, assist our injured clan brother." He turned away in dismissal. Sighing, Vordan stood, his injuries screaming at him. He kept his face blank, displaying no sign of the pain he was in. The other male had hit like a battering ram. He could feel bruises appearing all over him. The right side of his jaw felt like it was on fire after that last blow. Lenora reached down into the pit and held out her hand, and he gratefully accepted her help in climbing back out. "Come this way. There is a room for us." She led him into a small chamber off the pit room which held a shower cubicle and a medic. He allowed himself to be cleaned up, and some topical medication applied to the cut on his ribs, as well as a painkiller. Lenora was silent, waiting until the medic had left. Every touch, every bruise that was revealed as he cleaned off the sand and the sweat and the blood caused her frown to deepen, her jaw to tighten. Eventually they stood in the room alone. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. Casting around for the right thing to say, Vordan ventured, "I am all right, lady. You need not worry for my safety." Lenora opened her mouth to speak, then shook her head and thought better of it. Verit are built for this. Literally genetically designed to take the punishment of battle and keep going. By tomorrow I will be mostly healed. "He could have killed you, Vordan," she hissed, fury and concern warring in her face. "No, he couldn't have. That was theatre, plain and simple. If I truly felt myself in danger, I would have got out of that pit and grabbed one of the security personnel's guns and shot him. We could have dealt with the fallout. All of this was because I was trying to adhere to your family's traditions. You think that makes it better? Knowing that you only got hurt because of my family and this ruse. You think that makes me feel any better about all of this?" Her anger broke. "You are my responsibility here. I got you into this. How do you think I felt watching you being battered by Gruag? I've seen him literally beat people into pulp dozens of times." His response was gentle, implacable. "I am my own responsibility, lady, not yours. I accepted this mission same as you, and I will do whatever is necessary to see to its success. Don't take on the responsibility for the world, Lenora. This isn't your fault or your call. I could have walked away at any time." "That's where you are wrong, Vordan. This mission is mine to command, and you are here on my orders." His own anger rose to meet hers. I am a soldier, not a slave. Don't make the same mistake as the maman and confuse the two. She stepped back, hurt. How could you think I would see you as a slave, Vordan? Do you think so little of me? He was truly furious now. How in the goddess's name should I know what you think? You're a chameleon, lady. I guess you did inherit something from your reptile father. You change personality and story as easily as others change their clothes. I don't know if I've even met the real Lenora yet. At least what I do is honest. I fight and bleed for those I care about. She looked as if he had struck her. Instantly he regretted his harsh words. Before he could take them back, apologize, she spoke over him. This has nothing to do with you being Verit. My team are all my responsibility. She shook her head to forestall any more comments. I can't do this with you just now, warrior. I must go and negotiate the deal with my family. I will see you back in the Red Wing. I'm sure you can make your own way there. She was gone. The emptiness in the room made his own stupidity all the more obvious. He had lashed out at her, projecting his history with the maman onto her. Anger and hurt together could only lead to one outcome. He sighed and pulled his clothing back on. He would see what he could do to repair the damage in the morning. Lenora walked towards her father's office, shoving her fiery anger and pain down. She couldn't deal with it just now. Her father had summoned her, and to negotiate with Suthaka, she would need all her wits about her. She knew the summons now was a tactic, as much as anything else. He was hoping that she would be emotionally unbalanced, and it would compromise her negotiation skills. Unlike the grandeur of the temple, Suthaka's office was small and cluttered. It had always been that way, the shelves lining it filled with trinkets and trophies from his travels. Her father sat behind his desk, her Malati on a comfortable divan next to a small fire, her feet up on a stool. Her sister Ari was nowhere in sight. Come in, Ella. We have much to discuss. Her father beckoned her to sit in a chair across the desk from him. They sat looking at each other in the dim light. It is good to see you, daughter. You look well. She nodded. And you too, father. We missed you. When I had heard you had gone to join your mother, I thought it was a visit, that you would become bored with her quiet life and return to us. Then, when we heard you had joined the military, I thought you lost to us forever. Yet here you are, back in the home of the Unor once more. He grinned. And with a Verit mate, no less. I would expect nothing less of my daughter. He is impressive, a fitting match for you. She nodded again, remaining silent. Tell us then, what deal you offer. I know you well enough that you have not come back to rejoin us. She took a deep breath. Do I have your word that you will keep this secret, whatever you decide about the deal? Her father pondered, the firelight reflecting off his scales. I do. I am hunting someone. Someone has been attacking my new home world, hiring mercs. I want to know who. What is it you think I can help with? I want the name of the person that hired the mercs that attacked Dalat Colony last month. They came on an alliance ship. Her father whistled. These are dangerous waters, daughter. Big players. Then you know who it is? Of course I do. My daughter lives in the colony. Do you think I wouldn't know what was going on there? She nodded. He was right. Whatever his faults, her father had been deeply protective of his children. No insult had ever gone unrepaid. What do you offer? 5 micrograms of Zelan. He stilled. You want this information that much? We do. They came to my home, father. Tried to take what was ours. I will find them and punish them. She was surprised at the viciousness in her own voice, how much she meant it. He grinned widely. There you are, my Lenora. I had hoped you had not lost your fire, submerged in your mother's soft people. He looked over at Melody, silently communicating. We will give you this information, on one condition. What is that? You will come and visit us again. We all miss you. We accept your life choices, but we cannot accept your absence from our lives. Family is all we have. Lenora's breath caught in her throat, ambushed by surprise at the surge of emotion. She swallowed and licked her lips, responding huskily, I agree, thank you. Her father blinked, connecting his HUD to hers. When she accepted the connection, the information she needed floated to her. There it was, the code name of the buyer, Mushit. It meant nothing to her. You should know, word is that they will have another job on the market soon. A stop and seize for a logistics route. He smiled at her. Should be something you'd excel at, daughter. She removed the plain, unmarked canister of Zealand from inside her shirt and handed it over to him. His eyes widened in surprise as he accepted its slight weight. "Where did it come from?" "That's classified, Father. It's real. That's all you need to know." He examined her closely, squinting, trying to read her. She gave nothing away, impassive. All Alliance canisters were sold in Alliance-branded vessels, where you could track the sale back to its original mining source. The plain canister screamed it was unofficial. "If you have an alternative source of Zealand, let me know. There are lots of aliens willing to trade for it. It would be very lucrative." She said nothing. She could give nothing away. This was what her father did best, ferret out secrets. It was his greatest skill, one he had passed down to her. Lots of us are sick of the Alliance and its humans' first approach. Think about it. It's a big universe outside the human colonies. "Thank you, Father. If it's all right, I'll go now and leave you." "Do you have to, child?" Melati asked. "I had hoped, now that business is done, you would sit with me a while." Lenora laughed. "You mean let you ply me with alcohol and questions until you pry my secrets out of me?" Melati smiled enigmatically. "I have missed you, Ella. And I you. I would be honoured to sit by the fire with you." "And a few drinks?" her father asked. She laughed again. "A couple of drinks." She dragged her chair over to the fire and got comfortable as her father ordered the drinks. Just for a while, for a few hours at least, she could be just Ella again, here with her father and Melati. It warmed parts of her soul that she hadn't even realised had gone cold. Chapter 6. Pull a Thread. The next morning, Lenora calmed Zira on her HUD as she stuffed her belongings back into her pack, urgency thrumming in her veins. Zira answered on the first call. "What's up, Ella?" she chirped. "We have a lead. We have the name of the merc that hired the team, and he has another contract out just now. We are going to take it." Zira whooped in response. "What's happening?" came a voice from off-screen of the HUD, and Zira turned to repeat what she had told her. She heard a male voice cheer in response. "Odrin says congratulations too. We need to show some muscle when we bid. My sister will loan me a few personnel, but I need more warriors." Zira frowned. "I can ask the Dagger Kiss if they'll loan us some, but they are an elite unit. They don't have those types of numbers." Odrin spoke again from off-screen, and this time it was muffled. Zira rolled her eyes in aggravation. "Give me a minute." Zira put her on hold. Lenora raced around her room, grabbing the rest of her things while she waited, and moved back into the lounge room, where she met Vordan, who was doing the same. "Ready?" he asked. "Yeah, just updating Zira." Zira came back into view. "Odrin has an idea. I'm going to add him to the comm." Odrin appeared in a window next to Zira. "He says that we should ask the Mammon for some Verit warriors. They are mercs, after all, and a combined force of Verit, Falosian and Unor should be mixed enough not to attract attention." Lenora considered. "It's a good idea, but it can't be Dathalka. Everyone knows that the Dathalka clan runs the colony. We may as well put up a sign that says spies are here." Vordan motioned to her, and she added him too. "What about Tothas? I still have contact with my old clan, and they are well known." They considered. "We'd still need the request to go from the Mammon." Zira smiled at her. "Fortunately, we have a Mammon on board." "You're not serious," responded Lenora. "Skara is green as earthgrass. She's just turned 16. They'll never listen to her." Vordan squirmed. "Actually, they will. Mammon are given to other clans to raise and to widen the gene pool. But Skara was born Totas. The Mammon in charge of the clan is her mother." There was a long pause before Zira laughed. "Well, I guess that's handy." Lenora nodded once. "All right, let's do it. Zira, discuss with Skara and make the call to both the Tothas and the Dagger Kiss. We will make ourselves known to the buyer and bid for the contract. I'll let you know when we have the details." "Yes, ma'am, acknowledged," confirmed Zira. They signed off and Lenora turned to look at Vordan. The tension from last night lay between them. She wasn't sure how to pierce it when he stepped forward and took her hands. "I'm sorry, Lenora. For what I said last night, I was angry and lashed out. I didn't mean to hurt you." She was taken aback. In her experience, males rarely apologized. "I am sorry as well. I didn't mean to imply you were lesser, but this mission is under my command. You are all my responsibility." He nodded. "I understand. I won't let it get in the way again." She stood back and plastered a smile on her face to hide her lingering confusion. There were too many things unsaid between them, this strange intimacy that the past 2 days had created warring with this polite distance. Lenora grabbed the little knife and wire that was sitting next to her pack. "Thank you for the loan." He looked at them, then pushed them back to her. "No, keep them. They suit you." It was unexpected, like so many things about him. She had no idea how to respond. Like she always did when emotions got complicated, she focused on her work. She thrust them back into her pack. She turned back and examined him critically, noting that his wounds were already well on their way to healing, the more minor ones already nothing but faint red lines. "How functional are you?" He grinned at the innuendo, at her blatant attempt to change the subject and keep a distance between them, but resisted the urge to needle her. "I am 80% functional and will be back to full operating efficiency by this evening. Cuts, bruises and soft tissue damage are easy for a Verit to heal." She nodded, her eyes tracing the remains of a deep cut on the side of his face. "Good." She paused. She couldn't leave it like this. Whatever her feelings, he had placed himself in danger for her and tried to set things to right between them. She had to show the same courage. She took a tentative step towards him, placing a hand on his chest. "Thank you, Vordan, for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." He smiled and placed his hand over hers. "It was my pleasure, lady. Your wish is my command as the goddess wills it." Their eyes connected, and she felt the moment of searing intimacy down to her bones. This wasn't the cocky flyboy, or the angry competent warrior, or the teasing friend. This was something else entirely. Something dark, glittering with promise. She licked her dry lips. "Is that so?" His eyes tightened, awareness electric between them. "It is." She tilted her head up towards him. "And what if it wasn't a command? If you had a choice? What would you do then?" she whispered. He leaned in, his cheek against hers, his lips on her ears. "Are you sure you want to know the answer to that?" She nodded. One hand gripped the back of her neck, his thumb under her jaw, tilting her face away from him. The other hand trailed up her side, skirting the curve of her breast to her shoulder. He nuzzled the mass of her hair back to expose her nape, and bent over, setting his teeth to her in blatant possession. She shuddered in response, her hands gripping his shoulders, flexing, unsure if she wanted to haul him closer or push him away. He nipped at her nape, tiny bites punctuated by little kisses as he worked his way up to her cheekbone to feather kisses to the corner of her mouth. He licked the seam of her lips, probing for entry, before he swept in and consumed her. He held her tightly as he deepened the kiss, and she moaned in response as they went up in flames. It was incredible, unlike anything she had ever experienced before. She had mated in the past, but this, his long, drugging kisses were flat out the hottest she had ever experienced. Eventually he gentled the kiss, breathing heavily. He pressed his forehead to hers, nuzzling her. "I would do all sorts of wicked things, my lady. You need only signal your interest." She breathed heavily, desperately trying to get control of her raging hormones. "Holy shit," she replied weakly, and he grinned in response, all proud arrogance. "You are a dangerous male, Vordan." Bastard knew exactly what he had done to her. She shuddered and stepped back, feeling strangely light. "I see. Well then." She turned and grabbed her pack and sauntered to the doorway. She felt his eyes on her the entire way, and she had never felt sexier. "We will have to explore further, when we have more time." He nodded slowly in response, his grin wolfish. "When we have more time." They exited into the garden and met Ari at the Red Wing entrance. Ari embraced her, squeezing her tight. "I'm glad I got to see you, even if it was for Falosian business. Don't be a stranger, Elle. I miss you." She returned the squeeze, her eyes misting. "I miss you too. When this is over, come visit us at the new colony." Ari stepped back, dashing tears away from her jewel-coloured eyes. "All right, enough emotions for now." She raised her arm and pressed a section of her metal cuff. "Father has briefed me on the deal. I've sent you the last known address of the buyer." "What is his name?" asked Vordan. Ari grimaced. "He's a bug." Vordan paused. "I don't understand the significance. His species is insectoid. Their language doesn't really translate. We don't even have a good name for the species. We just call them bugs." "What do you call him then?" Ari shrugged. "The buyer. He is the go-between for all major merc deals on Relaz. His people have a compound in the Gamma sector. You need to go through him to bid on the job." Lenora groaned. "The Gamma sector?" Ari smiled sympathetically. "Sorry, but it's the only way to get to him." "What's wrong with the Gamma sector?" "It's one of the few places on Relaz where Unor doesn't have control. It's pretty far out of the city and the closet thing we have to urban sprawl, and it's run by Clan Vicious Crow. Vordan was sceptical. Vicious Crow? Are they a group of 12-year-olds? Unfortunately not. They are strong, fast and vicious. They are all male and don't have the best reputation with females. Gamma Sector is not a safe place for females to go. The only good thing is that they aren't the brightest. They mostly stick to drugs, alcohol and other intoxicants. They produce and black market. And, prompted Ari, making big eyes at her sister. Lenora squirmed, her gaze everywhere but at Vordan. And their leader is Trent Elder. We used to have a thing. Vordan stared at her for a long minute before guffawing. You used to date the leader of some hick moonshine gang with the name of a bad emo band. Lenora sighed. It's not like that. I was infiltrating the alcohol trade. We wanted one of the contracts they had, so I seduced my way in. I thought we were both using each other. He was using me as a way into the Unor clan, and I was stealing his contacts. I didn't realize until too late that he meant it. He really had feelings. I had to end it, and he didn't take it well. Oh, this gets better and better. We are going into alien hillbilly country where your jilted ex-emo moonshine gang leader lover will shoot us on sight to find a mysterious mercenary go-between grey market auctioneer, to somehow try and bid for a contract to undertake some nefarious action on the bare hope that we will trace it back to someone higher in their organisation that might know something about whoever attacked the colony. Yes. Just making sure I understand it. Yes. She bared her teeth. If you want to bail, feel free to leave. You know where the door is. He laughed out loud. Are you kidding? This is insane and hasn't a hope of succeeding, but it's the most fun I've had in years. Lead on, my queen. Lenora was nonplussed, and Ari laughed, clapping her hands. Oh, Elle, I really like this one. I hope you keep him. She turned and motioned for them to follow them. Come on, I'll take you back to your shuttle. Chapter 7. Gamma Sector. Gamma Sector looked like the physical personification of the morning after the night before. It was grey, dirty, and everything was slightly non-functional. They landed on a shuttle pad, amongst more than a dozen other beat-up shuttles. Vordan looked mournfully at the shining shuttle as they left it, sticking out like a sore thumb. Will it still have its tail lights and fins when we get back? Lenora patted him on the shoulder in commiseration. Not a chance, buddy. They were swathed in long, dark grey cloaks from head to toe, each of them bristling with weapons. Vordan had resisted initially, but as they merged into the crowd, he had to admit that she had been correct. Nearly everyone they saw, regardless of species, was wrapped in a cloak of some variety. People peered out of hard eyes as they passed, assessing them as both predator and prey. How can people live like this? He murmured subvocally, their HUDs connected to each other to form a private comms channel. Lenora shrugged. Some have no choice. For others, their situation is complex and multifaceted, a web of addiction and abuse. There isn't much in the way of social services in places like Relaz, and certainly not out here on the fringe. Most of the charities and shelters will only take people if they are clean and sober. The drug addiction houses won't take people with violent crime backgrounds, so on and so on. Others choose to be here, to live in the grey for their own reasons. Vordan's face was flat, showing no emotions. The clan structures on Verit are so restrictive and borderline abusive, but at least we look after everyone. None of our brothers would be allowed to fall so low. Do you really think so? I wonder. Every society has those that fall behind, that cannot function in the mould that society requires of them. If you don't see them in yours, I wonder where they go. Vordan didn't respond. They walked on, past dilapidated shops with grimy windows. Alien electric music blared from the occasional open door of bars they passed. Eventually they came to an open square where a market was in full swing. All around, stalls sold food, clothing, second-hand electronics, potions, medications, a mishmash of items. Lenora checked her HUD. Apparently the buyer has a comms repair shop somewhere in this square next to a food stall. All right, let's split up. Message when you find it. Lenora nodded in agreement and moved left to start working her way around the market perimeter. Vordan turned right, edging around a mother and her children haggling over food. He tried his best to hold his breath. The sense of the unwashed assaulted his sensitive feline senses. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled, and he turned slightly under the guise of examining an ancient blaster in a weapons stall, noting the male following him. He continued on, spotting a second small male darting between two stalls, and pacing him on the other side. Gauging their worn clothing, the hard, hungry look in their eyes and their youth, he figured them for thieves rather than gang members. He turned down an aisle into a quieter avenue and paused to examine some jewellery. Out of the corner of his eye, he watched the males signal to each other, before one made his way clumsily down the aisle towards him, while the other moved out of sight. When the clumsy male was near him, he stumbled into him. Vordan twisted around in a lightning-fast move and gripped the clumsy male by the back of the neck and tossed him at the second male, who had appeared from the shadows between two stalls, clearly intending to take advantage of his distraction. The males tumbled in a tangle of arms and legs, and Vordan was on them. He slapped one across the face with just enough strength to stun and hauled the other upright by his neck, bringing the scrawny male up to his face. On closer inspection, Vordan realized they were much younger than he had initially thought, barely into their teens. The grime and hard-eyed looks had hidden much, and the one he now held scrabbled ineffectually at his gauntleted arm in an attempt to release himself. "I don't like being robbed," he offered conversationally, "and I would hang up my furs in shame if I let myself be robbed by 2 children. Where are your parents? Do you not have elders that should care for you?" "Let him go," screeched the one on the floor in a high-pitched voice as he attempted to get to his feet, and Vordan looked down in shock. "Look at me," commanded Vordan, and the one on the floor glared at him, spitting fire with his eyes. Her eyes, Vordan realized. The smaller one was female and young. Vordan was swamped with guilt when he realized he had hit a female. Never in his life had he raised his hand to that gender. It violated everything he believed in, an affront to the goddess. Vordan dropped the male he was holding, who collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. He crouched down and reached for the female, cursing aloud when she shied away, fear clouding her eyes. "It is all right, lady, I won't harm you. I would not have hit you had I realized." For some reason, this froze her up in fear more. "I ain't no female," her voice quavered. "You got it wrong. Just let us go. We didn't take nothing." Her little chin tipped up in anger, wobbling slightly in her fear. "I ask you again, little one, where are your elders? Who should be caring for you?" She shrugged defensively. "Got no one, no dad. Mama died 2 years ago, just me and Let now. We do all right." "Is there no organisation that would take you in, that you need not do this?" The boy coughed behind him. "The Sisters of Divine Light feed us sometimes, no one else but the crows." "Ah, this gang I've heard of." The girl blanched. "Can't go near the crows." The boy crawled over to her, wrapping a skinny arm around her skinnier shoulder. "Crows ain't a good place to be a girl, less you want to whore." Vordan's heart sank at the casualness that they spoke of their circumstances. They sat in awkward silence for a moment, as he racked his brain on how he could help them. "Can we go, mister?" she asked quietly. Vordan considered them. He couldn't just leave like this. He owed the little female a debt for harming her. "Well, my companion and I are looking for someone. If you tell me where they are, I will give you 5 credits. 10, she promptly replied, and he resisted the urge to laugh. 5, and I will buy you dinner of your choosing from any stall in this market. They looked at each other before the female responded. "Fine, food first, no funny stuff." As she looked at him with her 2 wise young eyes, his heart sank. "Little one, I know you don't know me, but I am a Verit. My name is Vordan of clans Suthaka and Tothas. We do not harm females." She looked at him skeptically. "You hit me." He grimaced. "In my defense, you were trying to rob me and were dressed as a male." She considered. "All right. Who are you looking for?" "A bug that runs a comm shop in this square, next to a food stall of some kind." They exchanged glances. "We know him," the male responded eventually. "Then lead on, lady. Where would you like to eat?" She led him through several aisles to a busy stall, redolent with the smells of meat and bread. They waited in the line until they reached the front, where, with quick silver glances at him, she ordered 2 skewers and a loaf of bread. When it arrived, it was pitifully small. "Is that it?" he asked her, and she cocked an eyebrow at him, considering. After a long moment, she grinned and ordered several more loaves and several slices of roast. He remained silent, paying when asked, and watched them eat only the smallest portion. Assessing their consumption, he suspected he had just bought them enough food for several days. When they had their fill, they looked at him expectantly. "I have met your first term. Now where is the bug?" They led him just a few aisles away to a prosperous-looking shop with a real glass window filled with comms equipment and components. There was no text, but a large carved sign hung over the door with what looked like a stylized prawn. He looked down at his small guides. "Thank you." He fished out the credits and handed them over, and they promptly vanished into various pockets like magic. The male looked at him seriously. "If you survive the buyer and need another guide, ask anywhere for Let or Shari. We'll guide you again." "How did you know that I'm looking for the buyer?" Shari snorted. "Big outsider with weapons and good boots. Only one reason your kind visits the bug." She was so smart. He couldn't just leave them. It would haunt him for the rest of his days. He crouched down again. "I know you don't know me and have no reason to trust me, but hear me when I say that this isn't the only life available. If you want out of here, I will give you a lift to wherever you want to go. My shuttle is on pad 3 at the landing bay. When my business is done, meet me there, and I'll take you." Shari shrank back. "Do you think we're stupid? That we'd just go with some male in a shuttle? I have a female companion with me, she'll vouch for me." Shari shuddered. "Females are just as bad sometimes." He considered his next move, praying to the goddess that he wasn't making a mistake. "I will tell you who she is, but you must keep it a secret. She is Lenora of the Unor." Shari's eyes went wide as dinner plates. "Elle, the Black Valkyrie," she breathed in awe. "But I heard she disappeared." "She was working a job, now she's back." Shari and the boy looked at each other again in silent communication. "You've dealt well with us, so fair's fair. You should know that there's a bounty out on her in the Gamma sector. The Crows." He nodded. "We'll keep a low profile, but if you want out, she'll vouch for me." Shari shuddered. "Females are just as bad sometimes." He considered his next move, praying to the goddess that he wasn't making a mistake. "I will tell you who she is, but you must keep it a secret. She is Lenora of the Unor." Shari's eyes went wide as dinner plates. "Elle, the Black Valkyrie," she breathed in awe. "But I heard she disappeared." "She was working a job, now she's back." Shari and the boy looked at each other again in silent communication. "You've dealt well with us, so fair's fair. You should know that there's a bounty out on her in the Gamma sector. The Crows." He nodded. "We'll keep a low profile, but if you want out, she'll vouch for me." Shari was stubborn. She gave no sign of her interest. "We'll think about it." Vordan stood and nodded. He could do no more. He had given them the choice. It was more than most would get. "I expect I'll be an hour or so. Think fast." He turned and moved towards the store, calming Lenora on the HUD as he did. "I found the shop. I'm going in." "Damn it, Vordan, wait for me." "I think I can manage this, Lenora. I'm just asking to speak to the buyer." Vordan ducked into the shop, finding himself in an open area facing a streamlined metal counter, the walls full of racks of comms equipment behind metal security cage covers. The bug sat behind the counter. Sitting down, it was slightly taller than Vordan, swathed in a dark cloak so that only its head was showing. Its head was oval, with layers of shiny green chitin. It had large, black, faceted eyes and multi-jointed mandible jaws. The bug buzzed, the sound making Vordan's teeth ache slightly, and from a box on the counter a computer voice spoke. "Welcome to Bugs. How can I help you today?" Vordan approached the counter. "I'm looking for someone." "This is a comm shop. We don't do information," came the computer-generated voice again after a slight delay. "I need to speak to the buyer." The cloak rustled, and Vordan realized it wasn't fabric. It was wings wrapped around the creature. "I don't know who that is. If you don't wish to purchase comms equipment, please leave." "Please don't do this. This doesn't have to be hard. I represent a group interested in bidding for work. We have impeccable references and you will find us highly competitive." There was a longer pause this time. "Who sent you?" "I represent Elle of the Unor." "She's dead." The reply was immediate, the dead artificial voice somehow conveying scorn. "No, she isn't. She was working a job and she's back now. We would like to speak to the buyer." Vordan remained calm, but as the conversation continued, his senses were screaming at him that danger was increasing, and the damned buzzing was making his teeth ache more with each second. "The buyer does not wish to speak to you. Can you check, please? I'm happy to wait." "I have checked. The buyer does not wish to speak to you." Vordan shrugged off his cloak, revealing his bodysuit and armor. He rested his hand on his sword. "I'm afraid I will have to insist on discussing the matter with the buyer myself." A creature shrieked, a long, undulating, wailing cry that raised the hairs on Lenora's arms. She raced through the market, dodging people and stalls, blades up. When she reached the corner where the shop was, she skid to a stop, her mouth gaping in shock. Vordan stumbled backwards out of a doorway, crashing into a market stall. The stallholder puffed up its feathers and squawked at him in anger, shoving him off with a tirade of screeching curses punctuated with thrown vegetables. Vordan landed on his ass on the tiled walkway in the piazza, covered head to toe in green goop. Out of the doorway emerged a giant insectoid. Its legs emerged first, green chitin shimmering with red highlights as they unfolded. Its upper body reared back, revealing a dark red maw rimmed in sharp chitinous ridges, dripping more of the green goo. "Need help, flyboy?" she called, as she started wading through the tide of shoppers frantically trying to get out of the fight zone. He laughed. The idiot laughed. "No, your ladyship, I'll be right there." He flipped backwards into a crouch and trained a gun on the creature. She blinked. Where in the goddess's name did he pull that from? He shot the creature's right foreleg and it wailed again. Lenora clenched her teeth against the pain as the sound crescendoed, vibrating through her bones and making her teeth rattle. The remaining patrons in the market scattered. Vordan snarled at it. "Now tell me where the buyer is." It hissed at him, shooting another gob of goo at his feet and swiping with a ridged foreleg. He ducked and shot the offending limb. "I'm afraid that I don't have all day. I'm on a schedule. The only question is whether you run out of legs before I get my answers." "Vordan, stop!" she shouted, but she was drowned out by the crowd's noise as she struggled to get to him. The creature shuddered and began shaking from the depths of its body still hidden within the building, to the tip of its antennae, the motions becoming increasingly more frantic until it was battering itself against the sides of the open doorway. It stopped, frozen still, and Lenora noticed a new sound. It was pitched low, rumbling, and she felt it as a pressure against her ears. The creature froze for a long moment before its head disintegrated. It burst in a flood of green goo and goblets, the flesh sagging. From within emerged dozens of smaller versions with tiny iridescent wings. The creatures swarmed Vordan, and he went down under the weight of their bodies. "Oh, for the love of the goddess!" she cursed. She strode into the foray, gripping the creatures and tossing them off Vordan to reveal him covered in tiny bites. She hauled him to his feet. "Why are you asking it where the buyer is?" she yelled. He wobbled and looked at her funny. "Because we need to find the buyer." "That is the buyer." She pointed at the swarm and the decaying body. "They are a hive mind. They are all the buyer, you idiot. This is why I told you to wait for me. You have no idea what you are doing, plus you got hurt again." He looked down at himself. "It's only minor. It'll heal in moments." "No, it won't. The pupa form is highly toxic. You'll need antivenin immediately." Lenora turned to the bugs that were flitting around in a frenzy. She accessed her HUD and broadcast a broad-range, high-pitched signal. Immediately the creatures slowed, then stopped moving altogether. They drooped to the floor, settling into heaps, their wings gently fluttering. "Did you kill them?" Vordan asked. She cast him a slashing glance. "Of course not. I don't kill young of any species if I can avoid it, especially when I'm trying to make a deal with them." She looked around the now empty market and saw a basket weaver stall nearby. Grabbing a discarded basket, she scooped up one of the creatures. "So you won't kill young, but you'll kidnap," he quipped, feeling suddenly lightheaded. She didn't respond, just glared at him as she stomped into the wreckage of the shopfront. She moved to the counter, which by some miracle of the goddess was still standing, and grabbed the silver translation box. He continued on. "I just want to make sure I know where your boundaries are, for future reference." As he spoke, he wobbled again, his legs going weak suddenly. He sat down abruptly on the debris-covered ground. Fastening the small basket with the creature inside it to her belt, Lenora rushed to his side. "We need to get you anti-venin. Their venom is lethal, and you've got dozens of bites." She felt for his pulse, feeling the racing pulsing under her fingertips. She pulled his arm over her shoulder and hauled him up. "On your feet, warrior," she commanded. Lenora was tall for a female, but he towered over her. He was surprisingly heavy even for his size, as if his bones were denser than expected. They drunkenly lurched towards the market entrance when Lenora pulled them to a stop. Ahead she saw a slim figure picking through the debris left by the market exodus. Steadying Vordan with one hand, she pulled her gun with the other. "Either fight or leave, I don't have time for this," she called. After a few seconds, the figure detached from the shadows and moved to her, standing just outside of reach. She lowered her gun slightly, realizing that it was a child, a young male. She extended her empathic senses, feeling only wariness and hope. How odd. "Who are you? What do you want?" she asked. "Celette," mumbled Vordan. She looked at the young male inquiringly. "My name is Let," he confirmed. "What happened to him?" "He got bit by a pupa bug." Let winced. "Do you know if there is a medbay nearby?" The boy shook his head. "No public medbay in Gamma Sector, but I know a healer that can help." "Yes, and she was born yesterday." "Aha, and I should just follow you. Why?" Let looked at her with that strange mix of wariness and hope again. "Because he fed us. He paid us. He said you'd help us escape." "He did he?" she muttered, looking at Vordan. Vordan nodded, but even that seemed to exhaust him. "Why?" "Are you really Ella Unor?" the boy asked. Lenora sighed. "Yes, I'm Lenoriel Unor." The boy searched her face, gauging her sincerity. Evidently whatever he saw there was enough. "My sister Shari, she isn't safe here. We want passage out of the Gamma Sector. In exchange, we'll get you to a healer with anti-venin. You'll need to pay for it yourself." He waited for her to nod in agreement before he carried on. "We'll also guide you to your shuttle." Lenora snorted. "I know where I parked my shuttle, young one." He smiled tightly. "You've been spotted, lady. The crows are looking for you. You'll never get there without a firefight. Not without us." She considered. Vordan was fading fast. They really didn't have a choice. "Deal. Lead us to the healer." Let turned to go, and she reached out with the butt of her gun to tap him on the shoulder. "But beware, children. If you betray us, I'll kill you myself." The young male gulped and nodded. As they moved on, she heard Vordan murmur sub-vocally into her HUD. "No, you wouldn't. You don't kill young of any species." "He doesn't need to know that," she replied, and saw the barest hint of a grin on Vordan's face. "Come on, flyboy, let's go. You weigh a ton. We need to put you on a diet." He chuckled rustily, but she was alarmed to hear a slight wheeze in his lungs. The boy led them through the township, picking his way from shadow to shadow until they arrived at a nondescript wooden door. There was no signage, nothing to show a healer was in residence. She propped Vordan up against a wall, her arms, legs and back burning and shaking with the stress of hauling him. The boy knocked once and slipped inside. 1 minute turned into 2 as she stood guarding Vordan. Eventually a withered old male appeared, blinking owlishly in the light. He eyed Vordan up and down and asked in a heavy accent, "Species?" "Verit, human template, feline hybrid," she replied. "How long bitten?" "Half an hour, maybe more." He grunted. "He might survive. Come in." She pulled Vordan in, surprised to find the inside was a fully kitted medbay, shining sterile white. It would not have been out of place on any Alliance planet. She deposited Vordan on a bed where the healer had motioned. "Credits or trade?" he asked again. "Depends how much." The male looked at Vordan. "Big male, weighs much, 2 vials, 300 credits. Let whistled low. Lenora didn't even blink. It was daylight robbery, but she didn't have time to waste haggling. "Done, now heal him." "Proof money first," the male replied as he moved to a refrigeration unit in the corner and pulled out the vials. "Ha! And I have a seaside villa on Paradise to sell you," thought Lenora. "Half now, half later, if he lives." The male scratched an eyebrow. "No guarantee life." "Then no payment." He grunted again. "Fine." He held up a hand and projected his credit codes. He must have had some sort of embedded AI within his palm. She transferred him the credits with her HUD. He administered 2 pressure injectors, one to either side of Vordan's neck, and she winced at seeing the old-fashioned tech piercing his skin. "What now?" she asked. "Wait, live no live, up to him. 2-3 hours, no then." "Thank you." "No thanks, payment," replied the elderly male, smiling widely to reveal gleaming white sharpened teeth. "I work, other patients, you wait here." He pulled over a seat next to Vordan's bed, then moved away and through another door, deeper into the building. She sat for long moments, just watching his vitals on the machines. As she stilled, the focused efficiency that had filled her while they were looking for the healer drained away, leaving her hollow and scared. Stupid flyboy could have got himself killed. Why didn't he wait for her? He could have ruined the mission and got himself killed. For what? Arrogance? Proving a point? She wanted him to get better so that she could kill him herself for making her so terrified. It filled her with fear at how quick she had become used to him, to his stupid jokes and humour. The thought of continuing the mission without him. No, she wouldn't go there, not even hypothetically. The healer's anti-venin would work. He was Verit. Their constitution was legendary. He would be fine. She'd wait until he was better so that she could blister his skin with her lecture when he was well enough to hear and truly appreciate it. That decided, she pushed all thoughts of fear or failure out of her mind. A motion in the corner of her eye caught her attention, and she realized that the young male was in the room with her. "How did he help you?" she asked. The little male shuffled. "We tried to rob him. He caught us, then fed us and paid us to guide him to the bug." He was quiet, his response whispered. He was kind. The last was said with awe, as if the concept of kindness was so rare. "He is kind," she agreed. "I need to go. I need to get Shari. I'll bring her back here." "All right. We'll be here a couple of hours at least." He nodded and slipped out, leaving her and Vordan alone in the silence of the clean medbay. It was surreal after the chaos of the past hour. Eventually she roused herself. She had to finish the mission. She unclipped the cage from her belt and saw that the little creature was still asleep from the sound stun she had used. She took out the translation box and connected it to her HUD and resynced it to the little creature. Using a carefully modulated sound wave, she woke up the little creature. It promptly spat at her and rushed the bars of the little basket. Now, there's no need for that," she crooned. "Stop pretending, buyer. I know who you are." The creature stilled. "Talk to me. I've synced the translation matrix for you." "Release me at once," the creature spoke through the box. "I will shortly. I have no desire to be bitten today. Let's have a little chat first." "I will kill you and your family for this. You attacked my shop." "No, we didn't. We came to talk, to bid. The damage to your shop was entirely your own doing." It remained mutinously silent. "Besides, are you sure you want to take on the Unor?" The creature peered at her. "Who are you?" it demanded. "I am Lenora Unor." "Impossible." The reply was immediate. "She's dead." "No, I'm not. I was working at a job and now I'm back. My father will vouch for my return if need be. I'm starting a new venture. I've put together a little merc group. Some ships, 100 or so troops. We want to bid for work," the creature trilled. Whatever sentiment it was expressing, the translator couldn't interpret it. "You were never into merc work. You were an elegant artist, not a thug." "This venture will be elegant. We will undertake precision strikes, undercover wet work. In 5 years we'll be the go-to for elite mercs in the quadrant." The creature considered. "Very well. The next auction is on Valhalla in 1 week. Usually we would take remote or proxy bids, but as a new company you must attend in person. Go to the Red Sea Casino, ask for the Ruby Room." "Very well. Now release this one." She grabbed the basket and took it outside. Carefully grabbing hold of the lid, she positioned herself to slam the door closed the second she opened the lid, just in case they were tempted to impart any last gifts. It was anticlimactic when the creature simply flew away into the dirty grey sky. Breathing out a sigh of relief, she calmed Zira, informing her they had the location of the merc auction and that they were waiting for Vordan to recover from an injury before heading their way. "Do you need an evac?" "No, we're all right for now. I'll let you know if anything changes." "Remember, we're nearby." Mission completed, she returned to her vigil at Vordan's bedside. When she sat down, she noticed that Vordan's eyes were open and her heart sang. "Hey there, flyboy, how are you feeling?" She kept her voice steady, light, no hint of the emotion rushing through her. "Like my shuttle fell on me," he croaked. "You're lucky. Looks like we got the anti-venin in time." He looked around. "Where is the kid?" "Gone to find his sister." "I heard what you did with the bug. You got the info, completed the mission." She nodded. "Thank you. I'm glad I didn't screw it up beyond all hope." He sighed. "You did make a pretty big mess, flyboy. But I figure we're even since you saved our butts in the Unor contest." He smiled faintly. "Rest for a bit more. The healer said that it'll be a couple of hours before you're back on your feet. We won't be going anywhere until the kids get back." She stroked his iron hair back from his face. "I'll stand guard." "Thank you, Pirate Queen." He closed his eyes, content that she would take care of everything. Their respite was short-lived. Less than an hour later, the kids burst into the medbay. A little girl slid to a stop next to the bed, We have to go now. The crows are coming. Lenora nodded. Healer! She roared, and the males scuttled in. We must leave immediately. Can he be moved? The healer grabbed a tablet and activated the medical bed, displaying Vordan's vitals. Yes, for a brief trip. Anti-venin worked. Need more rest. 10 to 12 hours. Thank you. Pay before go, the male stated firmly. Lenora pulled up his details and transferred the remaining credits. Done with my thanks. Don't get killed. Pay customers hard to find. You need a healer again. Come to me. I fix. The male nodded his thanks and left. Lenora helped Vordan get to his feet. He groaned but was at least able to keep himself upright. I can move, but I'm less than 20% operational effectiveness in combat. It's all right, Flyboy. I've got this one. Lead on, Pirate Queen. The kids watched them banter back and forth with eyes as wide as saucers. Guide us. Take us to the shuttle. Their diminutive guides let them out into the warren of the township again, sneaking through backyards of businesses and hiding in shadowed doorways. They made it all the way to the landing bay before they hit trouble. At the edge of the landing bay, Shari pulled them down to a crouch behind an ancient troop transport hover vehicle. They peered around the edge to see several guards stationed around their shuttle. Shit, Vordan mumbled, and Lenora nodded in agreement. Odds of winning in a fight? She asked him, and he considered. Less than 1 in 10. I am at reduced capacity and there is little cover. We only have you. Your skills, while formidable, aren't enough to go against 4 guards with pulse rifles. Plus, we have the young. We cannot both defend and attack with a single effective operator at once. There will also be reinforcements nearby. We must move fast enough to take the ship before others arrive, and I am unable to traverse the distance rapidly. His summary was clipped, professional, spoken with the confidence of years of battle. We could create a distraction, offered Shari. Lenora smiled at the young female. While I appreciate the offer, it wouldn't work. Look at their eyes, their stance, the quality of their weapons and armor. They are professionals. They won't run off after an errant child or bolt at unexpected sounds. Shari examined the males with fresh eyes, seeing what Lenora pointed out. We need subterfuge. Lenora considered. They are here for me. I will approach them and offer to talk to Trent. It's the only card we have to play. They won't kill me, not if he wants to talk. Vordan gripped her arm. That's insane. There's a lot of damage they can do before they get to killing you. You don't know what he'll do. You don't even know if he wants to talk. Maybe he's issued a kill-on-sight order. There has to be a better option. They haven't, piped Shari. They want her alive. That's reassuring, responded Lenora dryly, and Shari looked at her as if she was nuts. Vordan looked around, desperate to find another option. He cursed when all he saw were empty landing pads and unused cargo pallets. He banged his head back against the troop transport in frustration and paused. He looked up at the expanse of the vehicle. How long has this been here? Does it run? Let shrugged. It's owned by the Crows. They use it for weekly troop drills. Vordan grinned. So it runs? Let returned his grin, understanding. It runs. All right, Pirate Queen. New plan. Lenora stepped out from behind the troop transport, arms up. Hello, boyos. Been a long time. Heard you're looking for me. The males instantly trained their guns on her. She continued her slow walk towards them. Now, no need for all that. You're looking for me, and I'm here. Where's the muscle? One asked. Lenora shrugged. Got bit by a bug and died. Easy come, easy go. I'll get another when I go home. One sniggered, and she pinned him with a stare. Something funny there. It's cute how you think you're going home, he replied, leering at her. Her voice was crisp. You really want to pick a fight with me, with the Unor? Have you forgotten who I am? What we do to those that cross us? Surely even in this shithole backwater you aren't that naive. They stiffened at her tone, and she had to admit that she felt a frisson of pride. Even a decade later they still knew her, feared her. I am Lenoriel Unor. I've killed more males than you've met in your life. Don't fuck with me. Heard you were on the outs with the family. This one was older, more seasoned. He examined her carefully, not buying her act. That wasn't good. She considered her options, decided to bluster her way through it. She stiffened, made her voice harsher still. The clan isn't in the habit of sharing our intel with country moonshiners. Lots of things changed in a decade. If you were back in, you'd know that. Crows have expanded. Got a lot more going on now. He cocked his head, his eyes hardening as he reached his decision. You know, I think we might just take our chances. Trent wants a little chat. Then I think we'll see if your daddy really will come to the rescue," she hissed, drawing her gun lightning fast. "Careful, sweetheart. Remember what happened to the last lot that tried to abduct and hold an Unor? I wiped them off the face of existence myself." Behind her, she heard a low whine and smiled triumphantly. She whipped her gun around, firing wide with a low energy burst that wouldn't damage the shuttle, but created a lot of light and noise, then ducked. As she hit the ground, the gun turret on the troop transport activated and in 4 precision strikes took out the guards. She hopped up and raced for the shuttle, hearing the shouts from the reinforcements as they barreled towards the landing bay to investigate the shots. The troop transport lumbered into the air in hover mode, less than a meter from the ground, and swung towards the shuttle. She reached it first and ordered her HUD to open the airlock and start the engines. The troop transport pulled alongside the shuttle, providing cover for the kids and Vordan as they clambered out and into the shuttle. She jumped into the pilot seat, Vordan slumping heavily into the co-pilot chair, while the kids crammed into the small cargo area. Bizarrely, Shari seemed to be having the time of her life, grinning widely and whooping. Strange child. "Can you fly this?" Vordan asked. "Well enough for this," she replied grimly. "Just don't ask me to navigate anywhere off-planet." The guards reached them as they were taking off and began shooting at the shuttle. Vordan closed his eyes, and the troop transport turret gun turned on the guards, laying down a blistering cover fire. She laughed, delighted. "Is that you?" He nodded, grinning, with his eyes still closed. "I connected my HUD to it before I left. Baby has remote control." They took off smoothly into the air with no further interference. They flew in silence for several tense minutes, expecting pursuit, before they began to slowly relax. Vordan looked at Lenora, then the kids. All right?" The kids nodded in unison before Shari piped up. "That was the awesomest thing ever, totally badass." Let nodded in support. Vordan grinned. It was the most age-appropriate thing he'd heard them say yet. He turned to Lenora. "We made it. I can't believe that crazy plan worked." She looked back at him for a long moment before she laughed. It was the kind of exhausted, half-crazy, half-relieved laugh that one makes after a traumatic event they aren't quite sure how to process. "That was seriously the most fun I've had in ages. Did you see their faces?" she cackled. "They were terrified. My legend precedes me." The kids giggled along with her as she wiped the tears away. "Still got it?" Vordan reached out to her, gripping her hand. "Yeah, you still got it." His eyes were warm, his appreciation honest and bright. "What now, Pirate Queen?" "Now we drop the kids off with Ari and rendezvous with Casti." The kids went silent. It was like a stone dropped into a pond. What's wrong? Wasn't that the deal? I can take you to the South Spaceport in Rilaz. The Unor will take you in. I wasn't kidding about my family. Ari, my sister, runs that outpost. They're always looking for smart young recruits. The kids looked at each other, in another of those silent communications that she was beginning to think might be indicative of some sort of telepathy. It wasn't an uncommon skill, and trauma often accelerated the development of such things. "We want to go with you." Lenora was stunned and took a moment to compose her thoughts. "Why?" "Because you're Ella Unor. Even the crows fear you. What you did there, that was totally badass. I want to be like you. Please teach me." Shari's voice was small, tentative, unlike her usual mercenary manner. "We are on a mission, Shari. It's not a safe place for children. Neither was the Gamma sector. The Unor won't be either." Okay, she had a point there. "Those aren't your only options. We could find a school or something." Let looked at her like she had sprouted a second head. "What would we do in a school?" Okay, again, another point. "Look, I just don't think—" "It's too late," Vordan cut in. "Casti is here." Belatedly, Lenora realized that there was a ship approaching on the scanner. Zira's voice filled her HUD. "Hey, sister, we decided to come get you in case Vordan needed medical assistance. We have the best medbay in the universe on board." The bulk of Casti eclipsed the nearby stars, its gleaming black surface absorbing the light all around them as it swallowed them into the shuttle bay. "Your sister owns that ship. Is this the same sister that runs the Unor at the South Port?" asked Let, his voice hushed in awe. "No, Zira isn't a blood sister. She is Falosian military, as am I. We are sisters by choice." "You're Falosian military? I thought you were Unor," asked Shari suspiciously. Lenora shrugged. "I'm both." She caught herself by surprise. For the first time in her life, she thought that statement might actually be true. Chapter 8. Pirate Queen. The moment they were given the all-clear on Casti, they opened the hatch and disembarked. Lenora couldn't help but notice that the shuttle bay had been redesigned. Rather than the featureless matte black expanse that was Casti's default, it had been reformatted to look just like any other spaceship shuttle bay, lots of grey metal and studded deck plates. Audran met them in the shuttle bay with a gurney, which Vordan was piled onto and whisked away. That left Zira, Lenora, and the kids. "Who do we have here?" asked Zira. Lenora made the introductions. "Perhaps we can go to the mess hall and feed the kids before we continue." Truth be told, they looked like they were going to fall over. The reality of what they had just done was dawning on them, and she could sense their emotions careening from anxiety to hope, underlaid by a persistent exhaustion born of living moment to moment for a long time. Subvocally, Lenora spoke to Zira. "Did you redesign the ship?" "Yes. If we're going to have strangers on board, we can't give away that it's alien tech. I had a long discussion with Casti and uploaded specs for a state-of-the-art ship. It will mimic it for as long as we need. No one will ever know that we are anything other than rich mercs with access to cutting-edge tech." Lenora nodded, grateful for Zira's foresight. She hadn't considered the danger she might have placed the kids in by bringing them here, exposing them to the secret of Casti. She mentally chastised herself. She had to be smarter than that. They got the kids seated in the mess hall, their eyes wide at the truly astonishing amount of food Casti pulled out for them, and then settled themselves at a booth a little way away so that they could converse in private. "Will Vordan be okay?" asked Zira. Lenora told her about the healer on the planet. "He just needs rest. We have a week before we need to show up at that auction. Plenty of time for a Verit to recover. For now, we need to head back to the Southport, drop off those kids, and borrow some of my sister's troops. I won't risk bringing in more Verit until we have to. I don't want to make it obvious who we are. A troop of mixed species will work better." They finessed the details and sat exchanging small talk for a bit. Lucius and Dinara hadn't checked in yet, so Zira and Audran had little info to provide. "You've done well, Lenora. I know this must have been difficult for you." Lenora sighed, sitting back in the booth. "It was. Harder than I thought. But also nice. I got to see my Melati, and honestly it was fun being Ella Unor. She never gave a shit what anyone thought. I think I forgot somehow that there were good bits as well as bad to being her." Eventually the kids grew tired. Lenora was filled with a relentless drive to seek out Vordan, to check he was okay. She told herself that it was because he was assigned to her responsibility, but she knew she was lying to herself. She missed him, worried about him. Somehow, amongst all his banter, she had grown feelings for him. She wasn't quite sure how or when he had sneaked in under her guard, but it had happened and there was no point in denying it. She knew she wouldn't rest until she checked on him. She walked the kids to their assigned quarters, assuring them she could be contacted at any time through the ship's comms. Then she went to medbay. Just for a peek, she told herself. She crept quietly into the room. Casti had dimmed the lights to allow Vordan to sleep, and there was a soft, warm yellow glow around the base of the wall, providing just enough light not to trip on anything. He lay on a large bed, designed for Verit proportions. A display above the bed showed his vitals, but she wasn't medical enough to know what they meant. He looked peaceful, sleeping. When he was awake, he flitted from charm to humour to intensity, but sleeping, he looked young and carefree. She turned to go, leaving him to his rest, when he spoke quietly into the dimness. "I know you're there. I can hear you. Sorry, I wasn't trying to wake you. I just wanted to check you were all right. It's fine, you can come in." He sighed, and there was a rustling sound. "I've made sure everything is decently covered." Shame, her mind whispered, and she admonished herself with a mental kick. He's just survived poisoning, and you're creeping on him. Could she get any tackier? "How do you feel?" She moved to sit on the side of the bed. She had to hop a little to get onto it was so high. "Better. Not so much like I might meet the goddess at any second." "That's good then." They sat quietly in the dark, in a peaceful cocoon of dim light. "I was worried we'd lost you there for a minute." She was aiming for light, but her voice caught. She couldn't quite hide the bone-chilling fear that had filled her. Hey, it's okay." His big warm hand reached out and captured hers. I'm here, I'm fine. You nearly weren't, she hissed. You nearly died. She was appalled to hear herself sniff, to feel wetness on her cheeks. Oh, blessed goddess, she was crying. I know. His words were solemn. I'm sorry. For my carelessness, I didn't mean to worry you. It won't happen again. His palm ran up her shoulder to cup her cheek as he spoke. Don't apologize to me. Be careful for yourself. She tried to pull away, but instead he pulled her down to lie next to him. Can we not fight just now, just this once? He asked. I'm injured, you know. She laughed, a wet sound. It's your own fault. I should kick your ass for not following orders. But then you might damage my ass. It'd be a crime to your sisters everywhere. She tisked him but didn't deny it. She had spent entirely too long admiring him, and she wouldn't lie, to him or herself. She allowed herself to lie there, tucked up against him, and relax. She took her first deep breath since he'd been injured, and let herself soak in his warmth. She let herself believe he was alive, that he'd make it. She placed her hand on his chest, pressing against the crisp hairs edging out of the top of his medical gown, and let herself feel his heartbeat thrumming under her fingertips. He rubbed soothing circles on her back until she felt like she was boneless, the tension melting away. She couldn't pinpoint exactly when she felt the energy shift, felt the mood darken slightly into something richer. She caught the tendrils of lust in his emotional resonance, felt his awareness of her closeness ignite. His hand moved down to the small of her back, pressing her against him, his other hand crossing over to the nape of her neck, pulling her to him. Lenora, his voice was rough. Say no, lady, if this is not what you want. They paused, balanced on the knife edge of decision. He waited, his desire plain, letting the choice be hers. It was an aphrodisiac like nothing else could have been. She surged forward, sealing their mouths together. His tongue delved into hers, tasting, surging in and out. He pulled her half over him, his big palms roaming her body. He groaned into the kiss and she froze. Are you all right? Did I hurt you? No. He tugged at her outfit impatiently. I am well. How in the name of the goddess do I get this thing off you? Casti. Yes. Lock the door. Yes, Vordan. She laughed, a deep, rich sound. He unsheathed his claws just a little and trailed them gently over her ass, feeling the soft dimples and curves. Have mercy, lady, he panted. No, she promised. She played with him all night as they learned each other's rhythms. It was sweet, he realized, sweet and generous, so like the female in his arms, so unexpected. She took and gave in equal measure. He let her set the pace initially until he couldn't hold back anymore. It was furious and raw as they met each other, thrust for thrust. She screamed her release into the cocooning darkness around them, and as she did, she connected them. She shared the exquisite joy, the flood of sensations, the colourful explosion in her mind. It pushed him over the edge as well, and he roared, holding her tight as they shuddered together. It was the most incredible thing he had ever experienced. In all his years, nothing could have prepared him for the searing intimacy of their heart-mind bond, of feeling the exquisite pain-pleasure of their joining. They lay there afterwards, sweat cooling on their bodies. He pulled the covers over them and she snuggled close, sharing their body heat. Deep in his mind, he could still feel her like a warm blaze. That was incredible. She murmured sleepily. I didn't know Falosians could do that. Only sometimes, she mumbled. Both people need to fit right, special. Her breath evened out as she fell into sleep. He lay there watching her, unable to believe how much the firmament of his universe had shifted so unexpectedly in such a short space of time. She was right, it was special. So was she. Nothing to date had prepared him for Lenora. She was a mass of contradictions, and he adored her in all of her guises. When Lenora woke up the next morning, she was lying on her side in a Falosian-style room, all pale wood panelling and dark jewel-toned furnishings. She couldn't remember how she had got there. The last thing she remembered was falling asleep on the big medical bed with Vordan. She was deliciously warm, and it took a moment to realize it was because Vordan was curled around her. His thigh was pressed between hers, his palm on her breast. Well, this is unexpected. So do we pretend it didn't happen? Murmured Vordan as he nestled deeper into her hair. Everything in her screamed in instant rejection. No, not unless you want to. He curved his arm around her, pulling her closer to him. No, I don't want to. He pulled the covers up higher, tucking her in. But I do need another few hours of sleep. I nearly died yesterday, remember? Then a certain pirate queen jumped my bones. She huffed out a laugh. I don't remember doing any jumping. I think I was the jumpy, not the jumper. You took advantage of my accommodating nature. She laughed aloud. Poor baby, your injured virtue. She snuggled down under the covers. Thank you for last night, it was incredible. He pressed a kiss to her temple. It was, he agreed. But you don't need to thank me, it wasn't a favour. He paused. I can still feel you, you know, in my mind just a little. It'll fade away, she responded quietly. With time. She paused again. That kind of bond takes either constant reinforcement and repetition, or a deep soul connection. She could feel Vordan weighing up her answer. What happens if there is repetition? Her breath caught and she rolled over to look at his face. Her gaze travelled over his features, so familiar to her now. His high cheekbones, the slash of his dark brows. Do you want it to happen again? He caught her gaze, the tension between them electric. Yes. I don't know what this is between us yet, but I want it to happen again. I want to know you, Lenora, inside and out. I want to know Elle, Lenora, Lenoriel, the Black Valkyrie, all of your faces. These past days have been the most intense, incredible experience of my life. I have felt more alive with you than I felt in years. So yes, if you'll allow it, I want to do this again and again until we know what we are to each other. Lenora was stunned. She couldn't speak. She'd felt his growing admiration, sensed his flashes of lust. But even their stolen kiss in the Red Wing hadn't prepared her for this. The emotions she sensed, his words, spoke of something much, much deeper. She gave herself time to consider, really consider how she felt. He had spoken with such soul-bearing honesty, she would not disrespect him with anything less. Did she want to do this again? She was highly attracted to him, physically and mentally. She had caught herself staring at him, thinking about him, more times than she could count. But was it more than that? Somewhere along the way, their fake relationship had transformed into something more real. She relied on him, trusted him implicitly. When she had thought he might die. Yes, I want to do this again. I don't know what this is, but the thought of losing you to the bug venom. My life without you in it would be infinitely sadder. She trailed a fingertip along his jaw. I'm not afraid to explore this. I cannot give you any promises, but I'm open to exploring where we go from here. His eyes heated. I look forward to the challenge of finding you, Elle. She smiled at him in invitation. Are you still tired? He pulled her under him with a squeak and a laugh. Not any more, lady. The galaxy could wait another couple of hours.